As the tempest of your spiritual awakening begins to lessen, and the burning away of your false identities has left you standing in a tranquil clearing that is unknown to you, the question that arises like smoke from your bones is, what now? Congratulations, you have made it through the journey into the depths of your soul. Your ego has broken, your illusions have been destroyed, and the masks that you wore on your face have been removed like layers of dead skin. Remaining alive, however, is not the end. In the aftermath of the scream, it is the threshold, the doorway, and the hush. And now, in this place that has been stripped of all pretense, with no one clapping and no fireworks celebrating your waking, you are left with the most arduous labor of all, constructing your life from the inside out. It is not the life that you were instructed to construct, nor is it the life that is intended to make other people feel at ease. Rather, it is the life that is in tune with the internal utterances of your soul. We were cautioned by Carl Jung, who said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Now that you have seen what you truly are behind the noise, do you have the confidence to live from that place? On the other hand, will you be tempted to re-enter the coffin of comfort, wrapping yourself once more in the garbs of performance in order to feel like you belong in a world that no longer feels like home? Because this is where the majority of people fail, not during the awakening process itself, but rather throughout the living that follows. As soon as they perceive the reality, they flinch. They take a touch on the holy and then forget. However, if you are still here, you need to realize that the work that you are doing in your life right now is working toward integration. The goal should not be perfection or enlightenment as a destination, but rather completeness. And, my friend, entireness starts at the place where you are the most afraid. Where the shadow is still breathing is where it all starts. You have made it through your awakening, but have you confronted the aspects of yourself that continue to be unable of speaking? The inner child that has been abandoned and who only knows love through suffering? That voice that has a deep desire to scream, but has learned a long time ago to keep quiet in order to avoid being rejected? Being able to survive the breakdown of your ego does not indicate that you have encountered all of your ghosts. It indicates that you are now prepared to sit with them, face them, and listen without feeling any apprehension. Jung was of the opinion that until we bring our unconscious into the conscious realm, it will remain in charge of our life, and we will refer to it as fate. At this point, it is your responsibility to confront the puppeteer who is hiding in the shadows of your mind. Not to eradicate it, not to give it a bad name, but rather to comprehend it and incorporate it. Your inner alchemist must take charge of your suffering and transform it into gold. You must become the alchemist within yourself. Currently, every feeling that arises is not a sign of failure, but rather a messenger. It is not a sign of weakness that every trigger occurs. Rather, it is a flare from a wound that is begging to be touched. Do not try to flee. It is important to avoid getting distracted by acquiring more knowledge, more teachers, or more spiritual tools. The actual classroom is located inside, and it is really quiet. It is so solitary. It requires us to be humble and to be really honest. It is not about reaching a state of healing. Rather, it is about achieving completeness. Jung referred to the self as the entirety of the mind, and he believed that the self is not found in the light alone, but rather in the union of opposites. You should not be afraid of your own darkness. The feelings of wrath, guilt, and envy that you experience are not obstacles. Rather, they are bridges. Rejecting the sanitized versions of healing that are being sold to you by spiritual shortcuts and opting instead for the raw sacred work of confronting your naked soul is what it means to follow this road. Every single day, every single hour, until presence becomes your practice and truth becomes your only home. Not just once, but every single day. Even so, the world will not comprehend what you are saying. There will be no applause for your clarity. Authenticity will not be rewarded in this way. You will come across other people who are still sleeping, and you will experience a peculiar anguish. This is not because they are in the wrong, but rather because you were once a part of their group. These interactions from the past now feel superficial. In your neural system, the noise of societal expectations can feel more like static than anything else. You start to need depth, as much as you need oxygen. To be alone is to become holy. The silence transforms into your safe haven. Despite the fact that you may feel isolated, you are not alone. Shadows, not people, have always been the way that this journey has been traveled. The contradiction is in the fact that awakening removes everything you believed you required, such as approval, identity, and roles, and replaces them with nothing but presence. At first, the presence of that person will be intolerable to you, simply because presence does not dull. Rather, it accentuates. It annihilates every falsehood that you have previously employed as a shield. But keep the fire going. Fire holds a holy place. Eventually, you will become aware of something new that is developing. Peace, tranquility, and a profound, resonant yes within your essence are what you should be looking for, not exhilaration or euphoria. It won't be necessary for you to persuade anyone. No evidence of your path will be required of you. You're going to simply live it in a private and genuine manner, even if no one applauds you, especially in that case. Moreover, the birth of true power can be traced back to this solitary devotion to the truth. The ability to remain true to oneself in a world that makes money off of your forgetfulness is more important than the ability to exert control over other people. Your journey will now become one of embodiment from this point forward. These are the steps that your philosophy needs to take, and these are the values that need to become verbs. Having knowledge of the truth is not enough. You must also embody the truth. In order to embrace your awakening, you must practice living a life of integrity even when no one is looking. Choosing alignment over connection, regardless of the cost, is what it means to speak when your voice shakes, to leave what is toxic even when it is familiar, and to choose alignment over attachment. It is possible that you will feel compelled to fake your authenticity in order to make it more appealing, digestible, and competitive. However, you should not allow it to be so raw that it is misunderstood. This place is not where your spirit arrived to be liked. Rather, it is here to be lived. Jung was aware that the act of individuation, which is the formation of one's own identity, is a radical one. It poses a danger to the tribal attitude. The collective comfort is disrupted as a result. Nevertheless, it also frees others by setting an example. It is not necessary for you to preach, simply embody. When you do this, you transform into a mirror, providing others with a permission slip to remember who they are despite the noise that surrounds them. It is not via preaching that light is disseminated. Rather, it is through presence, through a single human being who prioritizes completeness over performance and who prioritizes her own safety above the safety of others. It is important to keep in mind that the journey does not finish with the attainment of insight. Rather, it starts with the development of embodiment. The truth should not be gathered up like trophies. Put them on and let them bleed. Consider incorporating them into the fabric of your day-to-day life. It is only at that point that you will realize that your awakening was not a coincidence, but rather a calling. At this point, you are required to give birth to your soul multiple times. Every time the world makes an attempt to drag you back into amnesia, you will feel it. One time, not twice, but every time. There's a gradual inclination toward amnesia and the allure of recurring patterns. The second death is the death of vigilance, which has occurred now. The ability to survive your waking has provided you with eyes. Nevertheless, maintaining them demands discipline, not rigidity, but devotion. Wakefulness is a fleeting moment. Learning to remain awake is a practice. Nature, art, stillness, individuals who speak truth rather than comfort, and words that pierce rather than soothe are some of the things that you should surround yourself with in order to remind yourself of who you are becoming. You should also make a conscious effort to understand the texture of your triggers whenever you fall, as you will fall. Find out where they came from. Instead of trying to battle your shadow, you should make love to it. You should dance with your inconsistencies. Not only are you here to be complete, but you are also here to be pure. Permit that to sink in. This should be the catalyst that frees you from the confines of perfection. Healing is not a linear process. Rather, it is a spiraling process. And each time you go back to your wounds, it is not a step backward. Rather, it is a more profound initiation. Permit the work to be a mess. Get a human touch. On the other hand, it must never, ever be forgotten, mainly due to the fact that you are now aware that the self is not a destination, but rather an unfolding and a becoming. And you, dearly loved one, are the sacred firekeeper of your own, growing into your full potential. Your spiritual awakening was successful in surviving. Now, it is up to you to live your life as if it had some significance. Permit the truth that you have touched to be reflected in your decisions. Allow the clarity you've acquired to be reflected in the connections you have. Let the weight of your quiet be greater than the weight of your words. And when the world tells you to go back to sleep, smile, not with arrogance, but with compassion, because you've been there and now you're here. Not arrogance, but compassion. Just awake, not better, nor above, just present. There will be no relief. You will still come out on the losing end. That love, that anguish, and that overwhelming beauty of this human being will continue to bring you to your knees, will continue to do so. However, you will not do so any longer. Leaving oneself behind in order to fit in is no longer an option. In spite of the discomfort, you will make the decision to remain present. You will make the decision to feel, even if it causes you to feel broken. Now that you are aware of the fact that this shattering is sacred, the truth lies in this sensitivity. This path is the only one worth taking, despite the fact that it is cramped and frequently lonely. In addition, it does not lead to answers. Rather, it leads to presence, to depth, and to the indescribable and wonderful privilege of being fully alive. Therefore, take a deep breath, get up, and embody. It is not a lost cause. There is no damage to you. You are developing into something. And what the world requires is something that can only be provided by a soul that has been awakened. Not more information, not more capabilities, but more truth, more presence, and more of you. Proceed with your journey. You're the remedy there is. At some point, possibly sooner than you anticipate, the dust of awakening will settle, and you will find yourself staring at the life that you once constructed, including your work, routines, relationships, and aspirations. In addition to this, you'll get the impression that you are unfamiliar with everything. The reason for this is not that it is intrinsically negative, but rather that you are no longer the person who made it. Despite the dissolution of your previous identity, you came out on top. You are now confronted with the more difficult task of reconstructing something actual in its stead, which is really difficult. However, do not let yourself be fooled. Reconstruction is not about making things better. Rather, it is about telling the truth. It will be tempting to reevaluate the situation. In order to alleviate the misery of being in limbo, you should swiftly embrace your life. Wait a moment. This holy space in the middle is a soil rich in potential. The void that exists after a collapse contains more knowledge than 1,000 different lessons. Jung referred to this experience as the night sea journey, which is a type of travel in which an individual's concept of self is shattered and the psyche drifts unmoored. This liminal region, which is suspended between the known and the unknown, is where the genuine transformation takes root. So linger in the void of ignorance. Linger in the emptiness of the universe. Your intuition, which has been muted by conditioning, should now begin to whisper the contours of your new existence. These contours should not be based on what is required of you, but rather on what is true. There is no map provided here. Your internal compass is the only one you have. In the beginning, it is shaky, but when new acts of self-trust are performed, it becomes stronger. Every time you establish a boundary, every time you disclose the truth, and every time you say no in a way that respects your yes, you are not rebuilding for the world. It is for the soul that you are rebuilding. In addition, the soul requires nothing less than complete truthfulness. Your old wounds will attempt to recover their territory here, so be prepared for them. As a result of your awakening, they do not disappear. Rather, they progress. Their disguises are that of fresh opportunities. As new ties are formed, they reverberate. They evaluate your alignment, not based on how much you know, but rather on how thoroughly you put what you've learned into practice in your daily life. Having been smashed in the past, the ego is now becoming more crafty. Just as it is about to pull you back into the arms of something poisonous that is disguised as love, it whispers, "Look how healed you are, keep your guard up." The shadow does not vanish. Rather, it acquires knowledge. It is able to. The task at hand is not to banish it once more, but rather to walk beside it with your eyes open. Jung said that the only way to reach wholeness is not by severing a part of one's being, but rather by integrating all aspects of one's existence. Learning to see your patterns as invitations rather than punishments is a necessary step in this process. It is not because you are cursed if you continue to draw the same misery over and over again. Because the wound continues to communicate with you, continues to sing, and continues to want your attention. The process of healing is not linear. Rather, it is layered. In addition, every time one goes back to the wound, it presents a more profound possibility for reconciliation, not with the outside world, but with oneself. Allow every ache to teach you something. Take your time and let each pang to serve as a mirror for you. It is not possible to microwave depth. The slowness of offering one's full attention is where the soul blossoms. Refinement, embodying discernment, and letting go of the need to be noticed are all things that are necessary during this season. Instead, you should choose to see yourself in a clear light. You will come to the extremely painful realization that not everyone is able to walk beside you at this time. There are certain souls that are bound to your history. When you were younger, more amiable, and more woke, there were those hearts that loved you just as much. To add insult to injury, some people will feel betrayed, not because of what you've done, but because of who you've become as you advance. Try not to minimize your own size in order to alleviate their distress. Do not water down the truth in order to calm their anxiety. Your metamorphosis is not a criminal act. Rather, it is a natural and unalienable right. And although it can cause you to lose some of your intimacy, it will bring you clarity. Grief, loneliness, and a yearning for the ease of your previous illusions are all things that you will experience on certain days. Allow the storms to pass through you like they would. These emotions are not something you should try to ignore. That is you, with the intention of consciously surviving them. You are entitled to this rite of passage. You have to let go of the person you no longer need to be in order to become the person you truly are. In addition, the discharge will have the sensation of death since, in a sense, it is. The death, however, gives rise to something more pristine, something that is historical and genuine. Instead of recognizing yourself based on the parts you play, you start to recognize yourself based on the depth you hold. As time goes on, you start selecting connections that are more reflective of your inner integrity than of your outward appearance. You begin to talk not because you want to be understood, but rather because being silent would be a betrayal of your soul. The alchemy of awakening is described here. The concept of embodiment, not transcendence. If you want to return to the world with a more profound reality inscribed into your bones, you should not try to escape it. In the course of your journey, the world will present you with a multitude of exits, conveniences, distractions, and illusions that are disguised as dreams. Yet, you will recognize them for what they truly are. However, this is not because you have mastered life. Rather, it is because you have actually met yourself. After you have confronted your true self, you will no longer be able to hide. You will experience a physical reaction to the deception. There will be a resistance from your spirit to compromise. When it comes to performance, your nervous system will prefer tranquility. On top of that, you will have a sense of loss because the world that you once belonged to will appear far and foreign to you. In a society that is addicted to output and praise, you will find it more difficult to engage in small chat, more difficult to tolerate superficiality, and more difficult to keep up with the speed of the society. But this should not be confused with being alone. To belong is the first step in the process. Real belonging to the planet, to your soul, and to the few people who see you not for what you provide, but for who you are is more important than what you give. Give your life the grace to become holy. Maintain the integrity of your rituals. Make your relaxation a revolutionary experience. The reason for this is that in a society that celebrates exhaustion, choosing presence is an act of rebellion. And each time you bring your attention back to yourself by means of your breath, by remaining still, or by engaging in unwavering self-inquiry, you are strengthening the foundations of your awakening. The only way to become unshakable is to do this, but not by being flawless, rather by being there in a way that is complete, fierce, and unreserved. This is not a place where you're trying to blend in. For the purpose of remembering, embodying, reflecting, and rising, you are here. You become a beacon of hope for those who are struggling to find their way through their own storm. Not because you are in possession of all the answers, but rather because you have the courage to ask the appropriate questions and speak them out loud. After the collapse, after the stillness, and after the slow reconstruction, there comes a point in this lengthy unfolding when you no longer feel the need to explain yourself. This moment occurs after the gradual reconstruction, nor to your family, nor to your friends, and not even to the voices within you that used to give you second thoughts about everything you did. What were the questions that kept you up at night? Why am I like this? What exactly is the matter with me? When can I expect to feel normal once more? Start to disintegrate like a mist right before morning. Not because you discovered the answers, but rather because you have realized that you no longer require them. As you progress through life, you realize that life has never asked you to improve yourself. Rather, it has asked you to become who you are. This shift, which is just slight but seismic, signals the beginning of integration in its truest form. You're no longer able to exhibit recovery for the benefit of other people. It is no longer the case that you confuse spiritual understanding with superiority. In your return, you do not come as a preacher, but rather as a presence, a silence that does not speak unless there is something that is genuine to convey. You are the embodiment of the archetype of the wounded healer, not because you are free from wounds, but rather because you have learned to hold them with grace during the healing process. Carl Jung was profoundly aware of this. Your completeness, rather than your ideal state of perfection, is the most valuable gift you can give to the world. Pain, shadow, awakening, quiet, and the intentional choice to live authentically, even if it means giving up everything that formerly made you feel safe, are the elements that contribute to a wholeness that is sculpted out of these experiences. It is in this location that life becomes more subdued but more vibrant. As time goes on, you start to become aware of things that you had previously overlooked, such as the way the wind carries stories that only the body is able to hear, the way a single breath may change the course of a day, and the way the soul communicates not through words, but through symbols, dreams, and sensations. You are no longer searching for some unattainable enlightenment. Rather, you are sustaining yourself by drinking from the sanctity of this very now, which is your own consciousness. The reason that your pain begins to shine with significance is not because it disappears. Rather, it is because you have ceased rejecting the lessons that it teaches you. Why is this happening to me? Is no longer a question that you ask. However, instead of saying that, whisper, what is this revealing about me? This reframe is the most important thing. The transformation from seeker to seer, as well as victim to witness, is marked by this event. Suddenly, you find yourself moving through life like a lucid dreamer, fully aware of the illusions that you are experiencing, but no longer constrained by them. Nevertheless, its lucidity is not icy. It is not disconnected in any way. It has a gentle quality. It demonstrates sympathy, because after you have traveled through your own personal hell, you are able to perceive the suffering of others not as a threat, but rather as a reflection of your own. You're no longer required to work on individuals. Instead, you merely hold space. This, too, is evidence that you have persisted. When you stop rushing to save other people from the darkness and instead have faith that their path is precious as well, instead of rushing to save them. This conception of the self, which is based on Jungian theory and refers to the entirety of the conscious and unconscious, as well as everything that you are and have not yet incorporated into your being, becomes more than just a theory. Your reality will be shaped by it. You're able to recognize it when you're able to stand in front of the mirror without flinching. When the sensation of your quiet shifts from one of absence to one of presence. You're able to say no without feeling guilty and yes without having to perform. This is what it means to be whole. When your inner world and your outward existence eventually speak the same language, you will have achieved completeness. It is not flawless, and it is not always tranquil, but it is anchored, and it is founded in something that cannot be compromised by the chaos that exists in the world. That your energy speaks before your words do, that your boundaries are clear without the need to be defended, and that your very presence begins to influence the spaces that you enter are all things that you start to become aware of. Because you are aligned, not because you're trying to be different. In addition, you come to see that alignment is not something you seek after. Rather, it is something you remember. It is a return to a reality that has never been lost. It has only been buried beneath the fear, brainwashing, and loudness of a civilization that worships masks. You can now walk around without the mask. In addition, despite the fact that people from all over the world may stare at you with a mixture of admiration, confusion, and discomfort, none of it is able to penetrate your own being anymore. It's because you've found your way back to yourself. Your name has been brought to your mind. You are not the one that society has bestowed upon you. Rather, it is the one that your soul has always whispered to you when you were calm enough to listen. Your creativity will return at this point, but not in the form of performance, but rather as expression. In your writing, you say, speak, dance, build, and sing not for applause, but because it overflows, the dam of repression is broken, and in its place, a river of honesty flows. There is no longer any fear that you may be misinterpreted for you. There is no longer any fear of being by yourself to you. In point of fact, solitude transforms into your safe haven and your instructor. Over time, you come to realize that being alone does not mean that there is no love present. In this area, love develops into its full potential. And even your relationships are undergoing transformation now. Instead of looking for people who can complete you, you look for people who can reflect who you are. It is not the egoistic self, but rather the awakened self. One should look for mirrors rather than masks. You are able to recognize them without delay, not because of the words that they speak, but rather because of the energy that is all around them, the presence that is in their eyes, and the manner in which they sit in silence without fear. The ones who have also managed to survive are these. There is no need to explain anything to them when you finally meet them. In contrast, the body is the one that remembers. The remembrance that awakening is not a solitary path is reignited during that meeting, which is a rekindling of something that is both ancient and eternal. It is an initiation that is common to all. We wake up by ourselves, but we walk together, not in dependence, but in resonance. Not to be saved, but to be seen when we walk together. As a result, you find yourself back at the beginning, rather than at the conclusion. In contrast, its beginning is not the same. Instead of being born out of desperation, it is born out of presence. The motivation behind it is not fear, but rather alignment. Your own mind has become the observer of your own thoughts. One of your shadows has become your friend. Your efforts to become have been abandoned, and you have begun to give yourself permission to be. After surviving the fire, you now carry the light that it brought with you. Instead than blinding other people, let us guide them. Your truth should not be forced upon you. Rather, you should walk it so completely that it establishes a path by example. The purpose of your presence is not to persuade. Rather, it is to embody. You have not come to this place in order to flee the world. Rather, you have come to recall the sacredness of the world, with its grief and its muck, particularly how messy it is, mainly due to the fact that you are now aware that the miracle, the spark that gives birth to transformation, is contained within that mess. You've managed to contact that spark. You have traversed the unknown night and emerged not with certainty, but with clarity, not with answers, but with presence. You have traveled through the darkness, and that is sufficient. That is the entirety of it. And now, at the very edge of everything that you have been, you are being asked to do the most difficult thing of all, to live. Not to seek more, not to solve more, not to transcend more, just to exist. To live a life that is uncomplicated, truthful, and profound. Deciding to go with the mundane rather than the performance. To wash dishes with reverence while allowing your hands to do so. For the purpose of listening rather than escaping, to go into the forest. To love not for the purpose of receiving approval, but rather for the holy act of opening oneself up. To exist not as a notion or a job, but rather as a presence in physical reality. The most authentic manifestation of spiritual development is not a state of hovering above life, but rather a state of gracefully sinking into it. Because you have anchored yourself deeper than the noise of the world, it is not about being unaffected by the world. Rather, it is about being unshaken by the chaos that it brings. The ultimate stage of enlightenment is not something that can be found in a mountainside or a monastery. The way you sit with a stranger, the way you talk to a child, and the way you breathe when no one is watching are all examples of how you might find it. The holiness that you bring into the everyday is what makes it so. The way in which your life becomes the preaching is the way. It is not your words or your stance, but rather your whole nature. In this state of calm being, you come to the realization that nothing was ever lacking. It was always present, hidden beneath the training and the striving, the tranquility, the presence, and the information that was being sought. To be able to recall, you had to be broken. In order for you to hear, you needed to be completely empty. You have to be disoriented in order to find your way back home. It is time to let go of the notion that you will eventually arrive. Within the scope of this endeavor, there is no endpoint. There is no deepening or softening at all. More layers to peel, more masks to discard, and more false selves to bury in the soil of your being. There are only more layers to peel. In the process of revisiting past scars, you will discover fresh knowledge in them. The facts that you originally clung to will eventually become obsolete for you. Not because they were incorrect, but rather because you have grown beyond the confines of their container. So let this take place. Give yourself permission to change over and over again. In the divine dance of not knowing, allow your spirit to develop via the contradictions, mysteries, and mysteries that it encounters. You shouldn't be afraid of the times when you feel lost once more. The spiral includes them as a component. Rather than being a step backward, they are invites. It is not for the purpose of punishing you that life will continue to humble you, strip you, and soften you. Rather, it is to prepare you to hold more light. When you carry more light, you also carry greater duty. This responsibility is not to shine for other people, but rather to stay true to who you are in spite of the temptations that the world presents you with to perform. Your change is not anything that you owe to anyone else. You do not need to go into detail about your recovery. It is sufficient for you to live it in a calm and unapologetic manner. Moreover, by doing so, you transform into the very thing that this world is aching for: honesty, depth, and truth. You're going to become aware of how little desire you have to persuade other people of what you have witnessed. You will cease attempting to wake them awake, not because you are apathetic, but because you are wise. Due to the fact that you are now aware that waking cannot be compelled. A sacred unraveling, a collapse that must be chosen or the very least recognized, is going to take place. A few are not yet prepared. It's possible that some will never be. And it's not a problem. The rescue of people is not your job. Your role is to exude brightness, to become so completely oneself that your entire existence becomes a portal through which others can enter when they are ready to do so by becoming fully oneself. There is no need to hurry. It is impossible to find a rival. It takes time for each individual soul to blossom. And despite the fact that the world may appear to be disorganized, shattered, and engulfed in darkness, you now see things through a different lens. It is clear to you that every failure opens up a new opportunity. It is said that the seed of rebirth is contained within every death. When things start to fall apart, you no longer feel panicked. No longer do you have a dread of the unknown, because it is in the uncertainty that your soul is able to speak the loudest. Once again, the unknown is no longer a danger. It is a place of residence. And from that point on, You start to build not only works of art or ideas, but also a life for yourself. The kind of life that doesn't impress, but rather nourishes. Your life should be a reflection of the depth of your spirit. A life that is able to whisper to the world without the need to scream, "Here I am and I am real." This is the gift that comes with having survived the process of spiritual awakening. It's not that you've been spared from suffering. Rather, it's that you've learned how to confront it with presence. It is not that you have discovered something that will last forever, but rather that you have learned how to dance with sadness without losing your core. Not that you have achieved perfection, but rather that you have acquired completeness. Now you are aware that you are capable of experiencing both happiness and sadness in the same breath, that you are capable of being both powerful and kind, gentle and strong, boundaried and open. You have no longer been divided. This is no longer a role that you are performing. At long last, you are, thankfully, that which you are. In addition, that is more than plenty. You have evolved into a living invocation of the real in a world where there are duplicates, masks, and noise being produced. This reality, which includes your presence, your embodiment, and your truth, is exactly what the world has been looking for all along. Maybe you'll never achieve fame. Perhaps you will never be comprehended. On the other hand, if you are genuine, if you are whole, and if you are firmly established in your own soul, then you have already achieved success in the one and only way that truly matters. That is what it means to make it through life. This is what comes to mind when one awakens. Waking up, staying awake, living awake, and loving awake, even when it hurts, is something that should be done every single day, not just once or twice, but every single day. Especially in light of the fact that this, more than anything else, is the indication of a soul that has survived the flames and returned with something holy, the bravery to keep its doors open. Now take a deep breath. Put on hold. Allow it to reverberate. You have not been damaged. You are not falling behind. It's not too late for you. While you are remembering, you are also becoming. And if you pay close attention, you will be able to hear it, the still, quiet voice of the self that is waiting, observing, and getting ready. Do this while the noise and the dread are present. How are you doing?